What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Moguls. My name is Findlay-Shirras, and on today's show, we have an amazing startup entrepreneur who has bootstrapped his business to over 400,000 MRR, which is a huge feat, especially as a bootstrap company. He is the founder and CEO of AirDNA, a short-term rental data and analytics software that tracks over 4 million vacation rentals around the world, and it empowers entrepreneurs with the tools and insights to grow and optimize their rental business. So if you are renting your own home to make some money, if you're managing other people's properties, if you want to make money in the short-term rental space, or just make smarter investments in real estate, then don't move, keep watching and listening, and get to know and learn from Mr. Scott Shatford. Thanks, Scott, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
So why don't you give people like the 2-minute story, kind of who you are and what led you to AirDNA?
Sure, yeah. The story starts back in about 2012. I was laid off from my job as a consultant, really doing like data analytics for a consulting company. And I put my place on Airbnb. I went to go travel the world for 6 months. I'd been at the company for 10 years and sort of really stumbled into Airbnb. My neighbor told me about it. I was about to pack all my stuff into storage, and he was like, dude, just put it on Airbnb and make some money. I don't want to miss my neighbor. And so I did that. I had a booking like the next day from like a cute couple in Wisconsin. And while I was traveling, I was making more money than my rent and all my overhead combined, right?
Wow.
And so I came back 6 months later, couldn't really find the job that I wanted, and so I opened up 10 more properties in Santa Monica, basically doing them as corporate leases and sort of converting them into short-term rentals. So it's a pretty big trend now. People are doing it at massive scale, but it was pretty new back then. Like, you know,
Is it like drop shipping where it was really great at the beginning and it's now starting to get a lot harder to make money in it?
I think, you know, it's surprising with how much growth there's been in the market that there's not a saturation level that's been hit yet, because consumers are growing faster. The demand for that sort of experience is growing faster than the supply is, right? And so people can still make money. It's really the sort of the regulatory environment is more challenging. Building owners are much more aware of this sort of thing, and they want in on it. They don't like people, you know, breaking their leases, and so it's become harder to find the right types of assets to get into. But the margin is still there between what a long-term rental and a short-term rental earns.
So for the people who are like, oh no, I tried it and I don't make any money from this Airbnb thing, what have you noticed that they're either doing or not doing, and that's why they probably have that perspective?
Totally. I mean, it isn't as easy as a long-term rental. There's a lot of different things you got to be doing, right? You got to be marketing that thing well. You got to be decorating it well. You got to be providing a great customer experience. And so people are sort of not figuring out how to dial it in, right? And so I had a background in data. So when I opened up my 10 properties, I just geeked out. I'm like, what were the best guys doing? How were they charging? What was their minimum length of stay? You know, how were they charging their weekends versus their weekdays? You know, what channels was bringing in demand? How could I use social media to my advantage? And so, you know, when you start to like get into it, like how do I drive demand? How do I drive a great customer experience? And you sort of get on the top of the search results for that market, and you have a bunch of people saying the best place ever. You can start charging like incredible rates for properties. I was charging like $400 a night for a place. It cost me about $3,000 a month, and I was at 99% occupancy, right? So wow. I was driving, you know, $9,000 of revenue off a $3,000 property, and so I think it's just they're not trying hard enough sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into this AirDNA. What is it? Say, bucket your clients. Like how many? What do your clients look like? And what is the problem that you're really solving for them?
Yeah. So you know, just brief background on AirDNA. You know, now we're tracking every single Airbnb property, VRBO property around the world. It's about 10 million properties today that we're tracking. And so we scrape them every single day, analyze the calendars, and we've developed some algorithms that understand when a property goes from available to be unavailable. You know, what's the probability of that being a reservation? What's the value of that reservation? And so we've been able to build that up into a bunch of different products that are for either real estate investors or property managers, and even we have clients such as hedge funds and hotels and academic institutions. So there's a lot of different ways people are trying to leverage this data. You know, one is sort of this opportunity that's creating in the marketplace where any piece of residential real estate can now sort of be traded and bought at sort of a commercial real estate valuation, right? So it's no longer thinking about sort of residential real estate values as just like what all the comps in the marketplace are worth, but more like what is the cash that this thing's going to kick out. And so that's sort of the really interesting trend that we've seen over the last few years, is that people have kind of built property portfolios, 1,000 portfolios, prove out this business model, how sustainable it is that there's a lot more sort of institutional money coming into the space.
And are like you all over the world, or what geographic regions do you
cover? We cover the whole world. Any place that's got any sort of real coverage of real presence of vacation rentals, we cover it. So we cover 120,000 markets worldwide, and you can subscribe to that automatically on AirDNA.
So when someone's like, oh, I don't need it, and maybe like they're living in the world that was like pre-AirDNA, like what did people do before your software to get the same insights?
There really was nothing, and to be honest with you, like that was sort of, obviously the idea was I was trying to get smarter, and there was nothing out there. There were no tools. So, a property manager could have local insights on their market, right? Because they had 100 properties, and like a hotel, they could say, oh, I'm usually 30% occupied 60 days in advance, and now I'm not, and I should lower rates. And so they were using their own very insular sort of data. And so I don't know what they were doing before.
Google
really?
Sheets
Yeah, exactly. So there was really no way to do it before, and there was not enough for a scale in a lot of markets to even make it relevant, because there's so many different types of operators, different levels of sophistication. And now that everybody's got sort of data and benchmarking materials, they can say like, oh, I'm underpriced or overpriced, or like my occupancy is terrible in the shoulder season. I need to start thinking about how I'm booking more Wednesdays and Tuesdays because I have a lower occupancy than other people on those dates. So I don't know, we really created sort of this baseline that people can measure themselves against.
Now, I have a data-related company as well, and so knowing that, I know that data sometimes is dirty, it's polluted, it's just inaccurate, it's outdated, and so what are some of the challenges that you guys face with the data? Like, are all of these short-term rental sites you get all the data from, they're all just like perfect?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? The reason nobody had done this before is because it's hard, right? And the reason nobody did it before is because there was so much fragmentation in the marketplace, right? There wasn't the Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com, and those are the three main sites that control probably 80% of the supply globally. So when we are acquiring data, most of our data, 90% plus of it is scraping data. And so when you're scraping data, you can only imagine how many things sort of pop up from that, right? It is, the websites are changing all the time, right? People are creating sort of phantom listings. The websites themselves are creating like little I gotchas in their codes. The reason we've been successful is 5 years, real focus on accuracy of this information, right? It's not too hard to build a scraper, but to actually get that all in, massage it, make sure it's all consistent, accurate, is one challenge. The other challenge is that properties are listed across multiple platforms, right? So if we're scraping VRBO and Airbnb, it's the same asset, it's the same property listed across multiple platforms. So we've got to dedupe those listings, right? And so there's all these challenges of figuring out like this is the same property as that property. So we're going to merge that together and report that as a single property. There's a whole slew of challenges.
Is there any data like you think about like I would love for these insights? Because that would make people smarter even more, and I just don't have the data required to give this insight. Is there any data that you wish you had that you don't have yet that would make your platform better?
Yeah, we've been pretty specific on focusing on the vacation rental business. And as we think about the different use cases, like if it's a real estate investor use case, right, there's a whole slew of data on that side of things. Like I don't even bring in like home values or rental values into my platform in a real way. So like, if I was gonna bring in stuff like, there's a ton of stuff, right? Like we think that vacation rentals are sort of valued different than long-term rentals or general homes. And we think that is because people that are staying for 4 days versus 4 years are less interested in like school districts. They're less interested about crime rates. They're more interested in walkability. They're more interested in other sorts of things. Like they don't mind noise pollution of some sort, right? And so we think there could be a different way of sort of modeling and valuing properties that we think are undervalued on the market based off of it's not a great place to raise a family, but it's a great place to have people staying 3 nights at a time. So there's some of those sorts of stats that a lot of real estate companies have that would be interesting. We really wanted to dive deep into that investment target.
Is there any other in real estate investment need that you're getting into? Like one of the things that I have not found, and maybe you do this, is as a real estate investor, you have a strategy. You could be a fix and flipper. You could be a buy and hold for equity. You could be a cash, looking for cash on cash, like looking at your whatever that cap rate. That you could also be looking for buildings that have permits to build up, so you can tear it down, build it up again.
Sure.
And that data is out there, and I haven't seen a platform where you can be like, this is my strategy, now show me properties that have a high score that might be good for this type of strategy.
Totally.
Is that something you've thought about? Is that something that you do?
We would love to plug into other platforms that do that, just because we believe we are the only source of short-term rental data, and sort of our primary customer is what I would call sort of a property manager, and that's who I'm focusing on, is like the 2.5 million Airbnb hosts that are sort of operating in the dark and need some more information about growing their small business. Now, do I think that there's this huge real estate opportunity for what is the highest and best use case of real estate? Absolutely, right? And nobody really has that ability to say, what is the best use of this building? Is it tear it down? Is it rehab it? Is it long term? Is it short term? Is it buy and hold? We see some companies doing it. I've been talking to some guys in Australia, but I'm blanking on the name. But I think that is a really big opportunity that I haven't seen it either.
Because as an investor, I was like, well, how do you do it? He's like, well, I have to walk to the city hall. I'm like, well, that sounds like an inefficient process. I'm like, that data's online. He's like, really?
Right.
Let's talk about the short-term rental market, because it has been just rising and rising and rising. Like, how much is it growing?
Yeah, so it's grown a lot since 2012 when I started, that's for sure. I mean, so what we're seeing right now is about 6 million properties on Airbnb, about 1 million of those active today in the U.S. So it's a massive global phenomenon, and the U.S. is really sort of just a small piece of that whole pie. So it's growing about 30% year over year. It used to be triple digits a couple years ago, so just kind of the law of big numbers, it's sort of slowing in growth, but in terms of like overall properties being added, it's still pretty substantial, right? Maybe 250,000 properties added in the last year. We talked about the challenges with the data. I mean, these properties aren't just like a hotel. They don't pop up and stick around for the next 50 years, right? They kind of pop up for a weekend, they disappear. They're going, guys leaving town for a week, he puts it up there. And so when we're tracking short-term rentals, it's super complicated to sort of figure out, like, is this guy actively renting? He hasn't had a booking in 3 months. And so, the raw numbers are often hard to sort of articulate, like what it is, because we see 20 million properties sort of appear over the course of the year, but we've got to kind of break that down to like active, actually getting booked sort of properties is about 1 million in the US.
Now, one of the things that I've seen, because I experienced this in Toronto, that there's just all this new legislation and all these issues with short-term rentals for affordable housing and fair housing and buildings saying like, you can't Airbnb here or do any short-term rentals here. How is that, like, what, is that a really big problem, or is it just media, and is short-term rentals kind of a problem for housing?
So it's a good question. So the affordable housing comes up often, I'm fairly active in sort of the world of fighting the regulation that the hotel industry is sort of trying to bring upon us, right? And so we see that this whole narrative has really been brought up. It's in all the strategy docs of the AHLA, which is the Hotel Lobby Association. And so they've been trying to sort of create this scapegoat of Airbnb and VRBO as sort of being what is driving up home values in San Francisco and Toronto or whatever other places. When we actually look at the data, first off, out of the total home supply in Los Angeles, right, which just had some regulations on this, it's 0.009% of the home supply are like full-time active vacation rentals. If you just think about that alone, you're like, this can't be seriously impacting.
Really, it's that small of a percentage?
Yeah, so it's a huge, it's a very small percentage. What is it actually? I think it's actually 0.2, depending on if you want to count it as the most properties you could. And so when you think about that, right, it is a zoning and planning issue, right? Just build 20,000 more units in Los Angeles, and you cover the entire short-term rental market, right?
Yeah.
The also way to think about it is vacation rentals aren't affordable properties generally, right? These are the top like quartile of properties, or high-end properties in West Hollywood and Venice Beach and all these nicer markets, so, right? So you're not really taking like, affordable housing off the market in most circumstances. Yeah, prices of homes might be going up in extremely tourist, heavy destinations, but we think that if you think about a lot of other things, foreign buyers, tax incentives, like zoning, that's where the real issue is. But somehow they've been able to create this narrative that Airbnb is really the bad guy,
Yeah.
And really, you get me going. I mean, Airbnb is great for the consumer, right? The consumer that wants more choice in how they travel, and it's great for the homeowner, right? That wants to maybe have to make some more money if their times are rough, they lose their job, right? And so, like, really, it's a win-win for the consumer, no matter which way you think about it. And it's really the only person that wins from this regulation are hotels, right? That are
So do you see, I don't know if you've come out with any courses, but there's that Ryan Dice guy, I think, who has some Airbnb course where it's
Sure.
like, hey, first I'll teach you how to make money without even buying a property. You can just lease and then release
Right.
or short-term rental that long-term lease that you just got and make some money. And then you can start to maybe hopefully buy real estate and make more money.
Yeah.
Is it something that with the right systems and tools and data, it's really a nice blueprint that a lot of people can add to their life to make an extra $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a month or something like that?
I lived the story, man. I opened up my first Airbnb property back in 2013 as an investment property with $10,000 in a credit card, right? I just went to IKEA, bought a bunch of furniture, put the first month's rent on my credit card, and opened it up, right? And every 2 months, that place would become cash flow positive. I would use that next sort of 3 or 4 months to open up my next property and just started doing that.
And you would do a lease and then long-term lease?
Corporate lease, long-term lease. And then, basically just flip it into an Airbnb, right?
How much money do you think people should have to effectively start it?
It just depends on what market you're in, but
thing.
with $10,000, you can get into pretty much any market, into a one-bedroom property, furnish it pretty nicely, and get it up and running, and have enough cash to operate that thing until it starts paying you back.
Is one bedroom the best?
Well, I mean, if you're poor, it is, right? You
Yeah.
know, so that's where I was, and so it was the best. When people are thinking about doing this, typically one bedrooms I don't think is the best returns, right? Because you get 2 bedrooms. Maybe your rent's 30% more, but you can fit 100% more people in the property. You can charge more than 30% more, typically in a 2-bedroom. And hotels don't really have supply that competes with you being able to sleep 6 people in a 2-bedroom, right? You get 2 on the fold-out couch, 2 in each of the bedrooms, and so sort of the cost efficiencies of somebody traveling with a family is a lot greater when you have a 2-bedroom property. So typically that's where people are getting, just because the hotel supply can't really compete with it.
Are you seeing in your data changes in the consumer and in their tastes, like the short-term rental market, like the types of things that people are going after,
Sure.
which then affects the kind of properties you should have, what you should put in the properties?
Yeah.
Have you seen changes in the consumer?
I mean, I think the consumer, started really young. But the consumer is interesting because VRBO was sort of very old and traditional, and then Airbnb started this very millennial-based sort of traveler, and now it's sort of just everything in between, right? So the consumer, have they changed? No, I don't think they've really changed, but I think what they've identified is that if I'm traveling with my family, or if I'm traveling with my 12 buds for a bachelor party, I'm not even going to consider a hotel. And most people are traveling in groups, and they want to do something that is experiential in a property. And so I think that sort of is something that we've seen over the last few years, is that people don't want to a launching pad to go do things. They actually want to do stuff on the property. And so most of the people I'm talking to, a lot of them are sort of investing in what can they do, right? So pools are huge, or having the backyard and having the ping pong table and the pool table and the arcade games, and that sort of stuff is relatively cheap for how much value it brings to a property. So I think that's where we just see the biggest growth. Is actually bigger properties, bigger groups. Vacation rentals used to be hard to find a 6-bedroom home in Nashville. Now there's 300 of them out there.
So does your tech show people what type of places are giving the best ROI, the best return, so that they can learn what these value adds can be done to a property?
So we have a basic product called Investment Explorer, and so what it does is just compares, what are home values to short-term rental income and long-term rental prices to short-term rental, right? And so what it does is basically it says, where's the biggest margin between long-term rents and short-term revenue? Where's the biggest gap between what a home's worth and what it should be worth if it was really based off of a cap rate sort of a methodology? And so we do have a product that does that, but it doesn't really get into the nuances of like, adding a jacuzzi is going to make you $10,000 more a year, right? And so there's not really anything on the market that...
Is that true?
It is. I mean, it's the best investment in like ski destinations you can make for a property, for sure, right? Like I don't book one without a jacuzzi. I don't know about you, but yeah.
Let's talk about your tech stack. So I'm the person who wants to make money in short-term rentals, but I want to use technology to eliminate as much work as possible and use services to eliminate as much work as possible. Sure. What is that stack look like of technologies and services?
Yeah, no, so there's so many out there right now, right? So there's the full service property manager, which is most people are used to, right? You hand them the keys, you tell them you want to stay there a couple weeks out of the year or whatever, and they handle everything. Guest communications, cleaning, maintenance, services, marketing, everything, right? But now there's this whole like layer of different like menu options you can take in between, right? If you still want to do check-ins and you still want to do your marketing and you still want to communicate with them, there's that option, right? That option would be something like a guestie that would allow you to sort of do a lot of that in a very automated, tech-enabled way. And then there's such a slew of like, you can just outsource your cleaning, and there's sort of companies like Properly that you can sort of say, I just want you to do my cleaning. I want you to have like an app where people can take photos, confirm they've done this, reorder supplies, like do all that. So there's just like so many different ways to manage it nowadays, which was not really possible. It was either sort of you did it all yourself, you were scrubbing toilets, and it was a real pain in the ass, or you had to pay 40% for a property manager to come in. And so nowadays, like there's just so many different options. So you can be just paying for 5% to somebody to kind of meet people at the door and make sure they're checking in, or all the way up to 40%.
What is a good rate for a property management person? Like,
yeah, it really depends on the market. It really depends on the value of the home too, right? So if you're going to have like a pretty high value home that's going to be producing $100,000 in annual income, you can get that down to maybe 20%, 15% on a management fee. And if it's lower, it could be as high as 35% is sort of kind of the top
of the revenue or profit?
Of the revenue of the property.
Okay.
So it's it's a big range. It's really sort of market specific, and you obviously have more negotiating power if it's a pretty high end property. It's gonna kind of command a higher rate.
Okay. All right. So a couple quick questions to get to know you a little bit more and finish this off. What is your favorite business book that helps you?
On the book question, I really wish I was a better business reader. I think I'd be a much better CEO. I think it's the latest one I just read was The Advantage. And it's sort of one of these things that you're scaling a company, you sort of lose sight of really what does it mean to kind of create a healthy organization, because you're focused on healthy products, you're focused on making money, and you sort of lose sight that you sort of need to have a really healthy organizational design. So that's kind of the latest one I've been sort of focusing on.
Are there any particular business people or role models that you like and model and are influenced by?
Yeah, probably, not really. Who do I really focus on? I'm kind of an introverted person, right? And so I definitely focus on the people that are super outgoing and sort of inspirational sort of leaders. So I don't name names because they're kind of phony, but I definitely try to now that you are a real leader of people, you've got to figure out sort of how to be less heads down and sort of how to get people around a mission and a vision. And so I follow some people that sort of are good at sort of understanding the bigger picture of business.
Give me some names.
I won't.
Give me one. Okay, fine. How about this one? What technologies or apps could you not live without?
Good question. I mean, as a business guy, Slack has been like life-changing. When you've got so many things coming at you from so many different directions, and you just become sort of a decision-making machine. Just the way it's helped me organize sort of what all of my groups and projects and people are has been super helpful. From an app perspective, what else do I even use? Oh man, I just have no life now. I'm just a business guy. I work all day long. So it's probably all the business stuff, man, all the HubSpots and Slacks and analytics. So that's typically, if you see me looking at my phone, it's something nerdy and businessy,
How can people get in touch with you if they want to check out your product?
The website's AirDNA.co. You can email me at scott@AirDNA.co if you are so inclined. We got a lot of great content, blogs, and all of our products are there, so go check it out.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for being here, Grant.
Real estate is the best way to build wealth, and short-term rentals are an easy way to get into it. And if you're going to do it, you might as well do it well, and that's why data analytics companies like this guy and like AirDNA are there to help you make money, to help you be smarter, reduce your risk. Okay, so check them out, and if you want to learn about other technologies to help you make money in real estate, then subscribe to the YouTube show and the podcast, and I'll see you soon.